That's in Greenwich, okay. Greenwich Meridian time, Universal Coordinated Time.
Gentlemen, it's 5:30 on the dot, and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll ask for the roll call.
Good evening. Mr. Armando Cisneros,
Here?
Efrain Sanchez,
Here.
Ana Sainz, Michael Gutierrez,
Present.
Manuel Flores,
Present.
Jesus Rodriguez,
Present.
Luis Castillo Jr.,
Here. Present.
Richard Geisler,
Present.
Israel Reina.
Here.
We have a quorum. If you would please stand, and I would ask Mr. Rodriguez to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. The first item on the agenda is item number 3, public comment. If there be anyone present that wishes to make public comment.
Invisible man.
There appears to be no one that wants to engage us in public comment. Then the next item is the minutes, and I'll ask if you, they were lengthy. We had a long meeting, discussed many things. I'll ask if you want to make any amendments, or you want a formal reading, or if you want to approve them as submitted by the city secretary.
I move that we approve the meetings as submitted.
There's a motion by Mr. Castillo.
Second.
By Mr. Cisneros. Any discussion? Not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is approved. And let me just say at this point, I'm very proud of the work being done by the city attorney and the city secretary. But we have all this help at our disposal, all this advice and all this technical. I could never put together the minutes like they do. So, Ms. Rugen, excellent work.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is discussion with possible action and any other matter incident to the following city charter provisions. Section 2.04B, forfeiture of office. I took the liberty of asking that this item be looked at again. As you know, we have had a lot of discussion, and I think this has troubled the council, troubled us, and we've struggled with the issue of moral turpitude. And I took the liberty of trying to draft something that was more than just whatever a judge said, because that didn't resolve anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would ask you to consider this definition. And I'll put it in the form of a motion that we amend. Shall the city charter be amended as follows, adding this: a crime involving moral turpitude is defined as any offense under the Texas Penal Code which is classified as a felony, Class B misdemeanor, or any offense involving any theft or official misconduct under Chapter 39 of the Texas Penal Code. That would be my motion, and I was hoping I would get a second.
Yeah, I make a second. I believe it's stronger than what we discussed last time, so without knowing too much about it, I would second that motion.
Norm, what I'm looking at is there's of course, there's already a felony in there, but this time it's a Class B misdemeanor, which includes DWIs, that type of an offense. And the offenses are too numerous to mention, but I wanted it to include theft. And chapter 39 has to do with official misconduct, abuse of office, those types of offenses. And so I think that would very clearly send a message to anyone running for city council or sitting as a council person, that if they commit any crime of this nature, be it as minor as it is, shoplifting, anything like that, that they would be subjected to forfeiture of their office. And so, I'll entertain any discussion or questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman, I believe at the last meeting, we did take some action regarding that section.
Yes, sir.
So that has been brought forth and dealt with. And just to clarify, what is being proposed, are you asking us to reconsider the prior vote, or to amend and add what you're proposing?
Actually, that this replays the action that we took last time.
Okay, so we would need a motion to reconsider then, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir, if I can word it like that, to reconsider and redefine moral turpitude under the charter.
I have a question. You reference chapter 39 of the penal code? Is that available for us to review, to see it?
The Texas, any offense under the state of Texas is in the penal code.
But is
If it's not in the penal code, generally it's not an offense.
where would I be able to read that? The penal, where would I be able to see
39.
that? The penal code.
The Texas Penal Code, it's a book, a code that
Is it available
has all the
online?
offenses in the state of Texas.
Would I
And
be
the
able to see
offenses
it,
are
like, online?
classified as felonies, and then the lesser offenses are classified as misdemeanors, and there's a Class C misdemeanor, speeding, that type of an offense, which is a very minor offense. That's why it's limited to Class B, criminal trespass, that type of offense, and of course, any theft. And then there's some offenses, I think, under chapter 39 that may be classified as a Class A misdemeanor, but they involve official misconduct, they involve misuse of office, abuse of office, that type of thing, which is more related to sitting in a governmental body.
DWI is included in that, as a.
Yes, sir. That would include driving while intoxicated. And of course, I'm talking conviction. If you're not convicted, there's gonna be a gray area, because generally, it used to be that you could get deferred adjudication. You would plead guilty and the judge would defer entering a judgment of conviction and place you under supervision. But then the Texas legislature said, no, you can't do this anymore. If you plead guilty to driving while intoxicated, you can't get deferred adjudication. So then they created something called pretrial diversion, which means you still go under supervision, you don't plead guilty, and you comply with some supervision for a period of time, and the charge is dismissed. So if that happens, of course, you've not been convicted. So, there's some escape hatches.
Yeah.
Because as you know, if you're a police officer, if you're a fireman, if you're a federal agent, a driving while intoxicated offense is considered a very serious offense. People die on our highways because of driving while intoxicated. Yes, sir.
Well, we're going to go by the penal code, and the, you know, and we're looking at a conviction for moral turpitude as being the offense that, you know, basically works to kick people out of office, forfeit their office, then it should be a conviction period, regardless of how they got there. If it's pretrial diversion, if it's deferred adjudication, if there's no conviction at the end of the day, then that's the fair thing under the law to do, is there's no conviction. And I wouldn't call it a gray area. I'd say there's a conviction, or there's not a conviction.
Well, of course, you know, you and I, as lawyers, both know that it's an escape hatch to let people off lightly, whether they committed the offense or not. Now, sometimes the evidence is not there, you're right. But to me, it's a gray area because you did it, you got arrested, and then you go to the DA's office and you get some consideration because of who you are or because of what you do. I mean, that's a fact of life.
Oh, but that's the world, the way the world turns. I mean, the law should, you know, is applied equally to everybody. And yes, some people have, you know, get better deals than others, you know, whatever it is you want to call it. But I mean, there's a call that's made by the DA, not the prosecutor, or to provide that avenue for getting to the end of the, you know, the kind of sentencing thing. And if they comply, I think that's, you know, you've got to be equal to everybody that has gone through this process. I mean, you know, to me, it's like, it's kind of like an equal protection thing, you know. It says like, okay, what you're suggesting to, I think, implicitly what you're saying is that for public officials, there's a zero tolerance, you know, for any of these things that, you know, even if they don't even end in conviction, there's a gray area, and we can actually have the liberty, you know, as to go ahead and determine ourselves that that is a violation of the city charter, and that now you've forwarded your office because we find it to be an offense of moral turpitude, even though you've not been convicted for it.
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with this, Mr. Reyna, but
You specify.
it's a final conviction.
Yeah.
And we can't second guess. You know, sometimes the arresting officer makes mistakes. Sometimes the evidence is not there. And so some cases get resolved in that fashion. And sometimes in order to avoid a trial, even though you feel you're innocent, you agree to a pretrial diversion. It doesn't mean you're guilty. And so that's why it's worded in terms of a final conviction for a criminal offense.
I hear that, but I am hearing a final conviction, and it doesn't matter, you know, the process that they undergo to get to that point, right? Pretrial diversion or deferred
Well,
adjudication.
pretrial diversion and deferred adjudication are not convictions.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You mentioned that as a gray area, though.
Well, it is because.
It can't be a gray area if there's no
like I
final
said, it's
conviction.
an escape hatch
No, but
for some.
no, but that's the law. That's the law.
But I can't, you know, I can't second guess, you know, whether someone is guilty or not. In the eyes of the law, you're guilty if you were convicted. If you were not convicted, then it didn't happen.
Okay, so we're on the same page about requiring a final conviction involving moral turpitude for there to be a forfeiture of office based on the amendment to this city charter provision. Is that it? Is that what you're saying?
Again, that's the definition I'm asking that you approve for moral turpitude, because it's already in the charter. We just don't know what moral turpitude is.
And we also know, Mr. Chair, that there can be expunctions for certain types of offenses that.
Not if you're convicted.
No, what I'm saying, not if you're convicted. What I'm saying is that, you know, you can actually have a Class C misdemeanor charged for theft expunged based on a recommendation from the DA. and the judge accepting that recommendation, so
You're,
that.
you're the expert on expunction.
Well, no, I'm not the expert, Your Honor, but Mr. Chair, but I'm only suggesting that there are scenarios out there where, you know, you could find, that there's been a crime of moral turpitude for Class C, you know, and that would be expunged, and still, you know, they would forfeit, their right to hold office.
Yes, sir.
Besides driving while intoxicated, are there any other offenses that can go this route that you can at the end?
Well, it's just about any offense, because it depends on the offense report, on the evidence, the witnesses. So it could be criminal trespass, you know, some young man wants to see his ex-girlfriend, he breaks in.
What about assault or something like that?
The assaultive offenses, you know, you may have been defending yourself, but, you know, domestic violence, you know, it's
Those, those
Why?
offenses that you just mentioned, are they all within the chapter 39 penal code?
Chapter 39 has to do with official misconduct and abuse of office. Everything else is in the penal code in some
fashion.
chapter or
fashion.
another.
So all those other offenses would be covered?
Yes, sir.
So
The way it's-
the council people are subject to all these,
Yes, sir.
having committed on any of these offenses?
Under this definition that I'm giving you, yes, sir.
Okay. But it's based on conviction, so if there's a deal with the DA and there's no conviction, they're not subject to to forfeit their office.
It happens every day, as you know, JPs get arrested for DWI and nothing happens. And other people that are not in the public eye also.
Yeah. Well, and Judge, it also goes to the belief that public officials should be held to a higher standard, not a lower standard.
Absolutely,
So,
I agree totally.
absolutely.
So then we're at a point where Mr. Sanchez was referencing the previous meeting?
Yeah, so
It's
we
a
did
point
take-
of order, and so,
Yes.
so I would amend my motion, that we just, undo the previous, action and instead adopt this definition for moral turpitude.
And if it'd be acceptable, I'd like to ask Ms. Hale if she thinks that, since we already took action at the prior meeting on this and adopted a wording, position to propose, would voting on another motion be acceptable, or should we
If it
vote to
was-
reconsider?
If it was a unanimous vote, then it would be okay. One of the persons that voted could bring it back as a motion to reconsider, as long as it was somebody in the prevailing side. So if it was unanimous, yes,
We
you could
did
bring
have
it back.
one person against at the last vote.
yeah, I voted against it last time.
As long as he doesn't bring it back.
Right. Who voted against?
I did.
Okay, then as long as he voted for it, that he's in the prevailing side, he could bring it back.
Yeah, anybody in the winning side of the vote
Okay, so
can
Judge,
bring the item back, revisit.
Okay, so we can bring
First
it
you get
back.
a motion to revisit or bring it back, and bring that's the first motion. And then the second one, if it passes, is to actually change it.
Okay,
so being that I voted against it last time, it would be better for somebody else to make to second the motion? Yeah, I seconded right now.
Yes, it would
So-
be better, because it should be somebody in the
but,
winning side.
but that motion at this point is out of order. We would need to reconsider first.
Yes, that should be the
Yes,
first report.
okay, and then bring up the motion. So, Judge, I would like to make a motion to reconsider, the action that we took on the last meeting, pertaining to this topic of moral turpitude.
Forfeiture of office.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a second. Any discussion on that? Or any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 And so now my motion would be in order?
Good.
Then my
Ms.
motion,
Hale, is now the appropriate time to
Yes,
bring that?
yes,
I just wanna be sure that we are
Yes.
procedurally correct.
Crossing our Ts.
So that down the road, there is no,
Yeah.
when you
Yes,
didn't do this, so
exactly,
it's null and
exactly.
void, so yeah, you're right.
And do you want me to repeat the definition? Again, it's a crime involving moral turpitude is defined as any offense under the Texas Penal Code, which is classified as a felony, Class B misdemeanor, or any offense involving any theft or official misconduct under Chapter 39 of the Texas Penal Code.
And the motion is that replace the action that was taken.
Yes, sir.
Pardon me.
Yes, sir, that it be included now in the charter as being the definition of
I would
moral.
second that motion.
There's a second. Any other discussion or questions? All right, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Judge, I would like to request to step up item F, if possible.
There's a motion to take item F out of order. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Item F.
Okay, Judge, so what I'm requesting is that we include in the ethics ordinance a section stating, the simplest terms is that unless otherwise stated, a violation of the city charter will be considered a violation of the ethics ordinance.
Let me, before, is anybody seconding the motion?
Second.
There's a second. I had asked Ms. Coogan to give us a copy,
Yes,
or
sir.
at least an excerpt of the ethics ordinance. The Ethics Commission, under the charter, simply states how the Ethics Commission is created. And so 1202 is fair game to discuss under the publication. And the issue that I have with your motion, if you will see under the Code of Ethics ordinance, which is an ordinance adopted by the City Council, it specifies what the jurisdiction is. And you would be surprised to learn that a violation of the city charter is not mentioned as the items which confer jurisdiction on the Ethics Commission. So just so that you understand that, I don't know if your motion can be done in such a way so that the problem is that, you know, this is a matter that was handled by ordinance, and we're now going to insert one particular item that confers jurisdiction that is not under the ethics ordinance. I don't know if I'm making it clear. See, the jurisdiction of the ethics code talks about an alleged violation of the ethics code from time to time by ordinance. It says, an alleged violation of regulations concerning lobbying or a member of any board or commission for which the position is appointed by city council, an alleged violation of local campaign finance regulations enacted from time to time by ordinance, and an alleged violation of section 1201 of the city charter, provided, however, that the Ethics Commission has no jurisdiction to find or conclude that a city official or employee has forfeited his or her office or possession. And if you will look at 1201, it talks about personal financial interest. And so, I don't know, and I guess I'll defer to the city attorney on this matter, whether we can include in the Ethics Commission section, the paragraph that has just been mentioned.
Yes, there has been other cities and that you could confer jurisdiction in this paragraph as to what they have jurisdiction over. Right now, it just says any standards of conduct within the code, but you could say in addition, certain provisions of the charter, all the provisions of the charter, or, reserve certain provisions, because there are in fact provisions such as nepotism and other ones that even if there's a violation, there's really nothing that can be done because it doesn't say what the penalty is. Or no, there's nobody to investigate it. So there is kind of a I guess, a reason to have to do it because there really is something that needs to, I think that is something that was left out and it should have been addressed in there just to confer jurisdiction that's not already conferred to council or another agency should revert to the Ethics Commission.
So, it's in order then?
Yes.
All right. Any discussion on this? Any questions?
The purpose of this amendment would be to include the whole charter so that in future situations, the commission, the Ethics Commission will be unable to say, we can't handle that matter because it's not specifically mentioned in the 2 or 3 items here that are specifically listed. So since the charter is the governing instrument for the city, that's why I make the second, that any violation of the charter would be a violation of the ethics code.
That's why I had said, if you want to include unless otherwise stated, because that way the exclusion would be minimal instead of, right now, it's almost excludes everything. So, I don't know, that's something you want to add in there.
Well, again, whatever your motion is, and we discuss it.
Okay.
So the city attorney says it's within the power of this
Could you just
commission.
restate your motion again? So we
Yes.
can-
It's, my motion was to include this wording in the charter that says, unless otherwise stated, a violation of the city's charter will be considered a violation of the of the city's ethics ordinance.
I would just make a recommendation unless otherwise prohibited by law or unless otherwise governed by another
Okay.
body or
That's fine.
individual because, for example, municipal civil service has jurisdiction in here with regards to other matters, so does the council, so does city manager, so it would really be just those that there is nobody to oversee.
Okay, as amended then, yes.
Is there a second?
Mr. Reyna?
All right, who's got the final say as to who violated the city charter? The Ethics Commission?
Who can what?
Who has the final say as to whether the city charter has been violated? The Ethics Commission?
Well, in this case, the allegation would be that there was a violation of the city charter, and I guess the Ethics Commission would
Have to do that.
decide whether, what I'm envisioning is if the whole council votes on something, and they've all violated the city charter. That's the ultimate.
They should be following the charter.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing to be scoffing at, it should mean something. And I don't think it does, as much as it should at the moment. So,
If I may?
Yes, sir?
I'm concerned that we're gonna have negligent violations of the city charter, unintentional, not deliberate violations of the city charter. That the mens rea, the intention of the parties doing this really didn't mean to do it type of thing. I'm concerned that that's gonna be an ethics violation, and when they didn't have the intent to do so. It was like by accident type of thing, but ignorance perhaps, you could even say it's not an excuse, but sometimes it can be. There's a lot of things in that city charter, that it sometimes takes guidance from a lawyer to be able to tell you whether or not you are in compliance. And I'm concerned that we're gonna be like going on a witch hunt here on some of these so-called city charter violations and using the Ethics Commission as a way to wage a campaign against somebody who's holding office or some employee of the city and so forth. That's my concern.
Any other discussion?
No, I just want to say that I concur with Mr. Reina as I was hearing this discussion, my question was like, okay, who makes this? Because violation of the city charter is a violation of the Ethics Commission, so who decides what's the violation, if there was a violation?
And that's why the ethics, in my opinion, that's why the ethics will get to hear the case and determine if it was, unintentional, or if it was blatant, or whatever was the case. And we don't have that right now. All they have to do, no jurisdiction. So,
It's worse now than
Yeah.
anything we can do.
I would think
Let's
so.
talk about, the charter already provides for some forfeitures. For example, a city councilman ordering a director to do something. That's a violation of the city charter.
Mhm.
And so if no one does anything about it and the aggrieved person takes it to the Ethics Commission would have to decide, was there a violation?
If we do this.
Where's
yes.
the evidence?
Yeah, if
Where's
this
the evidence?
Yeah.
Where are the witnesses?
Yes. But at the
Typically, I
moment-
think that's how it would work.
Yeah, at the moment they don't, because they say it's not within our jurisdiction. So that's why it's, to me, it's very weak right now.
We should have a limitation on these types of offenses that can go to the violations of the charter, that can go and on the basis of what? We just heard of somebody being sanctioned with attorney's fees for filing a frivolous complaint with the Ethics Commission, which is another issue that we should probably address sometime down the road here. Can't have citizens being sanctioned for doing that, but we need to be concerned about having like a whole ball of wax being available to go to the Ethics Committee. Oh, that's a violation of the city charter. Let's go to the Ethics Commission and get them to go ahead and try that case. I'm concerned this is gonna be like a free-for-all. A never-ending game of gamemanship, if I could put it that way, political gamemanship, and using it as a way of waging war.
Any other discussion? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2. The motion passes. Then we'll go back to the regular agenda. Which is B, section 6.04, the budget. My idea of something that we may need to consider, and this may be a little bit too strong, and that's, where I'm gonna throw it out here. As you know, councilmen have a discretionary fund. How much is the discretionary fund?
It varies from year to year based on what council approves and based on the budget.
Currently, under the budget,
500,000.
Probably around 500,000. When I served, there was years we had zero, 50,000.
Well,
it just varies.
that is the concern that I have, that having that kind of a discretionary fund where everybody has a lot of money to spend at their discretion, that they should not be able to do it. That if we're going to require that the taxpayers' funds be protected, that money cannot be expended without approval by the entire council. And so what I wanted to propose is that we consider under the budget, adding a wording that says no expenditure of $5,000 under the budget shall be allowed unless approved by the affirmative vote of 5 council members. That way they can't have more than $5,000 in discretionary funds. Before I make the motion, what are your thoughts on this? Is this too restrictive?
The discretionary funds are spent strictly on whatever the councilman decides or
Well, they're
councilperson?
limited on how they can spend it, but they don't need to get council action, is my understanding.
They
They
need
do.
council
They
action.
do.
They do need council action. With
do?
this, and I did look into this, with our current administration and finance department as to the reason that they had this particular, provision, and it was actually something recommended by staff and the prior administration. This administration does not recommend it. They believe to protect the integrity of the fund balance that it should not be changed. This, to change it in the way it was proposed would have allowed, basically management to spend money on things that may not be, brick and mortar and things, and instead for more like operational daily expenses without going to council. So the, I'm talking about, I'm sorry, 6.45. 6.05, the one with the budget.
I think the judge, you're saying to add this new thing, or is it
Well,
a new section into it?
you know, having grown up under county government, there's a limitation that, you know, you can't spend more than $5,000 without getting prior approval from Commissioner's Court. And I thought the same should apply to the
And it's
council.
state law, it still applies here.
It's the same thing? So it's not necessary then?
No,
Well,
that's what, even when they've used their discretionary, for parks, it still has to go before the council and get approval, even though it's the councilman's discretionary.
And I think the
fund.
wording is district priority funds.
yes.
They changed it from discretionary.
Mr. Cisneros?
Well, what I was hoping that, yeah, I believe you're on the right track. What San Antonio has is an ordinance to authorize any, and their limit is $50,000. And anytime that amount is gonna be either lowered or raised, they have to do public hearings and all that. It has to be, the ordinance has to be amended. And that's why I think we need an ordinance, not just, you know, willy-nilly. That's my opinion.
I was just gonna
Mr.
mention that.
Rodriguez?
So even though the council has to approve or reject each council person's desire to spend his $500,000, usually it's approved, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Depends on the item.
almost always, almost always.
Almost always,
Almost
because
always.
otherwise when somebody else proposes
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
so usually it's
They
a
just-
done deal that
They defer.
whatever they want to spend the money on, they get it.
I don't know about the wording done deal, but I know that when they bring it to the council, they do vote on it, and for
Okay,
the
I
majority
didn't
of
mean
the
to use
times.
done deal,
Well,
what I'm
they
saying, that
they
there was
defer.
prior,
Sounds
prior,
They defer to that.
yes, but what I'm saying is usually.
Normally it doesn't get rejected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So, even though the council votes on it, it's like a standard
Like,
procedure that
formality.
happen, formality,
Like a
but it's
formality.
going to happen.
It depends, I mean, if it's, just depends on the item. I mean, someone could come and say they wanna create a rainmaking machine or
Well,
something.
have you,
They
do
might
you
not support
remember
it.
of an item being rejected in the last
I
X
don't.
number of years?
I don't.
When I was on council, yes, but recently I
Oh,
don't
recent.
remember. I don't remember any.
but the
being
thing is
rejected.
that they're spending it on parks and sidewalks and
But
it's a
speed-
slush fund for the councilman.
Speed bumps, speed bumps.
Yeah. But like what they're doing now, what in Independence Hill for the lighting, that's gonna come out of his funds.
And I believe another thing it distracts from the big projects. Everybody's so concerned with their own little 500,000, well, it's a lot of money, 500,000 that they don't focus on the city's real needs. I believe that's the case. I mean, that's,
Mr. Reyna?
Are there limitations on what they can spend on, or is it?
Yes,
Yes.
it's bond money, so it has to be
Are
brick and
those,
mortar.
are those kind of, set out in the ordinance itself, or?
It's set out
No.
in the bond itself, the bond language, and so everything has to be vetted, and it's typically just construction, sidewalks, things of that nature. It can't-
Brick and
It's
mortar.
not just for
But there is
daily
no
expenses.
ordinance for that, am I correct?
No,
in
that's
saying?
state law. State law requires it, and the bond itself requires it, so we
Can't
can't.
spend it on a billboard?
But the reason is a state law because they're being funded by COs, right? By funds, by
Yes, these are
bonds?
discretionary funds.
So there
for
is no
district
ordinance,
party.
they're funded by bonds, they have
Yes,
to keep
correct.
selling bonds all
That's
the
where the
time.
money comes from.
Okay.
The other item under the budget is 605C, exception to the capital program. Now, I'm not sure about the meaning of this section, but it says the cost of utility expansion must be made by those requesting expansion, and the city council will not obligate any citizen by adjusting the utility rate to defray cost. Is there anything that you all want to do with that particular section? I'm not sure how for example, the water rates being raised, was it being done to defray the cost of expansion?
No, that may be a factor that was considered by the developers, but in fact, as the ordinance itself showed, that it was done for a variety of reasons, as the fire chief stated, as the utility director stated, it was for existing services to preserve them and to ensure that they were sufficient for the community as it exists now. And it did help for future development, but not any particular customer, and that's what that's prohibiting.
Like, for example, if a developer has, 2 acres and he's gonna develop it and plat it and put in sidewalks and extend water lines,
That would not be allowed if
you
if we were
cannot
to do it
do
for
that
for one
under this
particular
section, is
development,
that
no.
correct?
Correct.
You cannot say, well, we'll help you with the water lines.
No, you can't burden the entire community or citizens for one individual.
But you said one. What if there's several?
No, I mean, if it's something, again, if it's gonna help the development, because that benefits the city in general, if the development of the city would benefit everybody at large, but not one or two. It's no specific developers, it's just the bigger picture.
Because that can always be said, this is going to help the city, and so.
And that could be said, but again, I mean, the reason that it was passed, the recitals, and again, that the department directors, was because it was needed because of the water pressure for the existing customers. I mean, that's one of the primary factors.
Judge, my question would be then, why did it say exception? If it's, for city general needs, why would it say exception?
Well-
Exception to capital program.
Well, the way it's worded, it means they can't do it to defray the cost of
Exactly.
expansion.
And that's what I believe happened, because developers were here one after another pleading for that expansion. And they got it. So, I mean, to me, that's pretty straightforward.
That's not why it was passed. And again, this is under the exceptions to capital program, not under raising utility rates. And every year we have to submit a capital program, the projects that we're gonna have for the year. And this is not a project we can have. We cannot have this considered as a project just for 1 or 2 developers. So it's different from the reason we raised utility rates. It has nothing to do with it. If it benefits the developers, I know they were here, but that is not why it was passed. And that's what the ordinance clearly says. And
And I think some of the developers, from what I'm remembering, were complaining that the existing system was so bad, or not so bad, but it was bad to a sense that their expansion of whatever they were doing, they couldn't do it because of the existing system, so they were for fixing the existing system. And so that was part of it, where the bond money and utility director was wanting to do it for the existing system, not for them. But they benefited because once they fix the existing system,
But, Mr.
then they can
Rodriguez-
do whatever they want.
Mr. Rodriguez, I believe that the utilities director said there were $45 million for new development? No?
I don't remember. They mean like,
I believe that's a fact, those are the facts. So, and I
As-
believe
as
that's
did
what
the
got,
Health Department Director.
that's what got Bish, I'm sorry, a citizen fined 8,400 because he filed
I
that
don't think that
specific,
was the reason, but
you know.
Well, he
So,
may have been wrong. I don't know if it was frivolous, but the bottom line is, you can't expend funds to help a developer. But obviously, you know, some of those water lines are very old with an existing,
correct.
infrastructure. And so it's all right to do it, you know, if you're doing it to correct the infrastructure currently existing within the city, just so long as you're not doing it to
Specific.
help extend the line,
yeah.
and that actually goes into the new development. Is that,
That's
That's
exactly,
the way it is.
and again, there was the Health Department Director with the health and safety issues. There was a lot of reasons for passing it, and it was not primarily to help any individual developer. or
I
group of
disagree.
developers.
well, again,
No,
we're discussing this section, if
last
you wanna
night-
make any motion.
Last night at the city council meeting, they had their consultants, and they said some of the pumps are like 35 and 50 years old, and they were astounded that the pumps were still working. So our water system does need an upgrade.
And I believe most of the, that is what is being spent mostly for the existing, $135 million for the existing, but there were $45 million for new development. I'm just stating the facts that the utility manager himself stated, so I'm not making anything up.
No one, we're not accusing you of making.
Yeah, no, but I'm just stating.
Then I'll go on to the next item. It's D.
No action taken on,
Are you going to, on the discretionary funds, or we're gonna take that up or not?
I was gonna ask.
Well,
There
I-
wasn't a motion, an official motion, I know there was discussion. I was gonna ask if there was any.
It was just discussion, I didn't make any motion,
Yeah.
it was an idea that I had, but with their explanation, I don't know, that, you know, that we could actually say under the budget, you cannot have discretionary funds.
No, but you could require an ordinance. Because the charter already has certain things that require an ordinance. There's 11 things, and you could add that discretionary funds would require an ordinance. Or it's district priority funds. We could add that.
You wanna make a motion and,
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to add, district priority funds to require an ordinance and to be added to that section of the charter that says actions requiring an ordinance. That would be my motion.
Can I clarify? The ordinance would state what? To limit their amount?
Well, it would.
Want to
it
give an
would,
amount,
It
or?
would give the amounts, the process, and como San Antonio, right? It would
But right
state
now, they're
everything.
done like that, no?
Through the budget,
you
yes.
wanna put a limit on there, or just
Well, that would be per the ordinance.
per the ordinance?
Or that's what San Antonio does. The ordinance says 50,000, and any amendment to that amount has to go through the process of amending an ordinance. And I believe that that's the best way to go. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
Well, stated, you know, again, so we understand what the motion is. We
Okay, let me find it here.
Can we ask the city attorney?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the situation in San Antonio versus what we have here?
No, I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to. I mean, we could come back and bring that so that we could ensure that it's the same issues that we're
It's
discussing.
the same thing, and not
So-
something different.
Because the state law does not allow, anybody to make any purchases over 50 without council approval, so.
Right.
The city manager has a certain limit also, it's a 50,000, I think, threshold, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
state law,
section
the
2.8.
government. So,
Action requiring.
and I think it may be in there just because that's,
I
the
don't know if we should
purchasing act requires it, and so maybe they just reiterate their purchasing
Okay.
procedures, but.
What page are you, Mr.?
Page 10. Being that it's section 2.08 and it's not on today's agenda, I would like to, for next time, to consider amending section 2.08, actions required in an ordinance to include the process of discretionary funds or district priority funds to require an ordinance for next time, because it's not on today's agenda, so we just have to do it the right way.
Could we take that up under?
I was gonna
future
say,
business?
at the end,
Yeah.
when we
Ah,
have
okay,
future
that one.
business.
Okay, thank you.
So then in item B, there's no action on anything right now?
No, sir.
Okay. In item C, Judge, capital program?
It's the same thing, no
Same thing, no
action.
action.
Thank you.
Then, item D, section 10.06, council district, adjustment of districts. We had discussed, this last time, and I think you were gonna do some research on this and make a presentation. No?
Not that I
I apologize now.
We will.
I think so.
Just for the record, let me read 10.06.
We read it. Read it. Read it. He said to read it.
One more thing.
10.6, city council districts, A is number of districts. There shall be 8 city council districts. B, redistricting commission. City council shall appoint 16 registered city voters who shall comprise the redistricting commission. The commissioners shall not be employed by the city in any capacity. Each council member will appoint 2 commissioners. C, report specifications by the first day of January after every federal census, or as soon as feasible, after release of certifiable population figures by the federal census. The redistricting commission shall file a report with the city secretary containing a recommended plan for adjustment of the city council district's boundaries. To comply with these specifications, 1, each district shall form a compact, continuous territory as nearly rectangular as possible, and the boundary line shall follow the center line of the street. Each district shall contain as nearly as possible the same number of people, but districts shall not differ by population by more than 10% of the population of the smallest district created. The report shall include a map and description of the district recommended and shall be drafted and proposed through a proposed ordinance. Once filed with the city secretary, the report shall be introduced as an ordinance to the city council members, by the city council members. Procedure. The procedure for the council consideration of the report shall be as for other ordinances, provided that the summary of the ordinance is published pursuant to section 2.09. It must include both map and description of the recommended districts. Failure to enact a redistricting ordinance, the council shall adopt an ordinance no more than 90 days from the date of the introduction. If not adopted by the city council by the 91st day, the report of the redistricting commission shall be deemed to have been adopted. Enactment. The new council districts and boundaries as the 181st day after adoption of the redistricting ordinance shall supersede previous council districts boundaries. For all purposes of the next regular city election, the new districts and boundaries shall supersede previous districts and boundaries for all other purposes as the date on which all the city council members elected at the regular city election take office. Incumbents, options, and redistricting changes. G. The redistricting changes affect the boundaries of the district that a particular council member represents as follows. 1, a council member serving a first term of office who is eligible for re-election may A, choose to finish out the term of the council member was elected to, or B, choose to run for election of the new district that the council member resides in. The end of the result would mean that the council member will have served the city for the 2 terms at a total of 6 years. Original council districts will now have a 2-year unexpired term open for another candidate to seek election to. 2, a council member complying with the final 2nd term of office may A, choose to finish out the term of the council member was elected to represent in the original district, or B, choose not to represent the district, and thus the 2-year unexpired term is left vacant for election. Those are the sections.
Mr. Alder, the information that you were supposed to have gotten for us for this meeting was the number of registered voters per district and the number of people who voted in the last election.
But the number of people that voted in the last election overall citywide was 125,000.
I don't know, but we wanted the information by district.
Yeah.
By district, that's what you were. And it came up because the issue came up of going back to at-large, the at-large situation. And the question is that, or what was stated at the August meeting was that there's some districts in the city, they have within the required number of people living there, within a 5% variance, but that there are a lot more registered voters in some district versus in other districts. And on top of that, that some districts have a lot less people voting regardless of the number of people that they have registered to vote. So the issue is that in a district, a councilman is elected by a lot more votes than in other parts of the city. That was.
Yeah, I remember. I apologize for that.
Mr. Reyna?
So where does that lead us? What's the point?
Well, the
That-
point
that
obviously
some
is to
districts have
equalize.
more voting people than people who vote in other districts, even though they're basically the same size, approximately the same size because they have to be,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But
The
one
old-
person,
the
one
old one
person,
man,
one
one
vote
vote.
principle.
No, I understand, and
One
it's already
person,
been.
one vote
it-
principle
it-
is a matter of.
It's been ruled
representing people.
constitutional even at the congressional level.
So I'm trying to understand what the
It
argument is.
came up because we have some council members elected with a lot less votes than in other parts of the city.
So I'm asking, what's
And so
the?
this is the reason why some people are saying that it's necessary to have at-large council members to represent the whole district versus having council members that represent their parochial interest within a certain area.
We could have at-large people representing the moneyed interest, we could do that too. Okay, we could do that too, and that, maybe some puppets there in the mix. So, I mean, there are the arguments that we can
Yeah,
make
there's
too, but
puppets
I mean,
everywhere.
it's people that are being represented by whoever is selected from that district, the number of people there. It doesn't matter whether they're voters, citizens, it doesn't matter. They will be represented because that's what the principle of the one person, one vote goes.
All we wanted was the figures.
Well, that's democracy. Some states, have 2 senators, but they have, a little bit of, how that works, right? That's democracy.
Montana, yeah.
So I'm trying to understand
me,
where the democracy
since we
fails
don't
us
have the
here by
numbers,
having,
We don't have the numbers, let's move the agenda. We'll leave this for another.
Well, he brought it
That's
up.
not at this.
For another day.
Well, those are vacant.
Okay.
Judge, we'll get those numbers hopefully by tomorrow, and we'll email to everybody so everyone has them.
Thank you, sir.
Per district, citywide and per district. And then we'll try to get also the census of how many people actually live in the districts. I think we can get that information, and we'll give you that information also.
Those nomás to clarify, you're gonna get both the number of the population and the voters in each district?
Yes,
Okay,
we should have those numbers.
all right, thank you.
We'll get them to you. Sorry about that.
Section E. Or rather, item E, section 11.1, recall provisions. And as you know, this has gone back and forth. It was approved one way last time, and so I'll throw it open for discussion or any motion that you wish to make. If you want to, I'll read the section on recall.
I'm sorry, Judge, I have a question. Have we not taken any action on this yet? No?
No, we had just
Okay.
voted, I
Okay.
think it was clarified in the minutes. We voted to have this as an item,
Okay,
for discussion.
all right, thank you.
It's 11.01. And, basically, in order to have a recall, it requires 10% of the registered voters in the city or district election to which the elected official was elected and shall be filed, et cetera. So, it requires 10% of the registered voters to have a recall. And, it used to be what, 10?
Now the actual vote.
10% of the total votes cast in the
exactly.
prior election.
Correct.
So what are your wishes? The voters had approved this one, as it is now.
I actually have the provisions. I don't know why I thought that's what you were asking me for. It was proposition number 22, and it was changed to 10% of registered voters. The vote was in favor of it, 30,307, against 15,940. That was the vote to change it to,
Almost to one, sorry, again? And percentage, what was?
almost
amount or the-
almost 2 to 1. It was 30,307 in favor of changing it to 10% of registered voters,
Okay,
and 15,940 against
see?
changing
See?
it, yeah. Those were the tallies.
But in that election, there were
It was
so
closer
many.
than that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Geisler?
Before.
In that election, there were so many items during the election,
Like 26, yeah.
and most of them were yes, the way they were worded.
So you think they just kind of
I think this was snuck in,
snuck in?
my personal opinion, that it was snuck in. And when you look who sponsored, but that's another, but the intent was, if going this way, you would have to register more people to call for a recall than actually voted in the election. So the original was 10% of those people that voted in that election. And I would move that we go back to that.
There's a motion,
I would agree, second.
and there's a second. Now, discussion, Mr. Reyna.
Well, I'm opposed to that, diametrically opposed to that. A handful of voters from a district, given the number of people who voted, that, figuratively speaking, could actually force a recall election, right? A minority of people, the people who are basically the losers in the election, can wage a campaign, recall campaign, and attack the person they lost to, and for any little reason, because you actually don't have any damn good reason to actually force a recall election to, ground yourself in a basis for a recall. And so you're gonna have basically merry-go-round, let's go ahead and recall them, we didn't like the person who was elected, we didn't support them, I'm not through yet. We didn't support them, so we're gonna go ahead and file for recall, and because we only had, only need 10% of the people who voted, that could be 100 voters, it could be even less, it could be a little bit more. Is that any way to run a local democracy, have people always elected to office by, let's say, 60% of the vote, and then 10% of the voters, people who voted, can go ahead and recall them? Okay, is that the way we want our democracy to work? To have a merry-go-round in our city council? Many cities, and I did a lot of research on this last time around because I served in the Revision Commission last time. Did a lot of research on this. Many cities even have it up to 40% of the registered voters, 35%. It's higher, not lower. 10%, when they went to 10% of the voters, people who voted, it was a change from the previous city charter provision that allowed, that provided for 10% of the registered voters of the district. So maybe they snuck that one in. So all I'm saying here is that, we want to make it easier to recall people, to have a recall election. Doesn't mean that they're going to win. It's just a recall election. Taxpayers foot the bill for that. You got a recall election, and then let's do it again. Maybe they get a recall, they put them in office, then the people who are recalled, maybe they go after them to recall them, and then we'll have that's no way to run a government. And you know, I would really admonish people to think hard about making that move again, because we would be like the city with the least number of people required, registered voters or people who would actually sign a petition to have a recall election. We would be the city in Texas with probably the least number of people who could actually force a recall election. I mean, it makes no sense.
Mr. Valdez,
Yes, sir.
off the top of your head, how many voters typically vote in a contested race in a district?
It just depends on the district. Some districts we have, I would say about 1,500, 1,500. Some districts you have 6,000, 7,000 people voting. It just depends on the district, number of candidates. I mean, this last time we had 12 candidates in district number 6. And so that was a little bit harder. And the argument that Mr. Reina just mentioned, those were conversations or I guess points of views that the council had. Several councilmen had the same point of view. Several had make it easier, make it harder. So they went back and forth on this, and they kind of left it alone. But más o menos, that's some districts have, again, 1,500 people voting, and some districts have 4,000 or 5,000.
Mr. Rodriguez?
How many recall elections have we had in the last 20 years?
There you go.
One.
I think maybe one.
So where's the abuse of?
There is no abuse, as far as I can see.
Well, there's no abuse one way or the other.
Exactly.
And I think
So when we had 10% of the people who voted, how long did we have that provision?
1981?
for a long time.
Sorry?
20 years?
Yeah.
And in those two,
Yeah.
81?
Well,
40
It's
years?
been,
you were there
it's been a
with
long
the
time.
charter.
So in 40 years, the one recall election. So I don't see an abuse here. On the other hand, if you put the figure so high, it's never going to happen. You're never going to have, you're never going to recall a politician, an office holder, regardless of his shortcomings or crimes or whatever. So it has to be a reasonable, at 10% of the registered voters, to me, it seems like an unreachable amount. It's never going to happen. And the higher you go, you might as well not have it, in other words. So in 40 years, 10% of those who voted in the last election won recall election. To me, there's no abuse. And so I also agree that we need to bring it back, like Mr. Geisler says, to 10% of those who voted in the last election.
Mr. Sanchez, anything from the left here?
Only geographically the left. Yeah, and I appreciate, the discussion that I'm hearing here. It's very good discussion. My observations here are essentially two, that in the last referendum where the voters decided, the outcome was a 2-to-1 to pass. And I hear that maybe something might have been snuck in, but I can see it maybe it passed by 5% or 8%, but 2-to-1 to me is a pretty resounding margin. And I don't know that we can second guess the intent of the voters with a 2-to-1 margin, or presume that we know more about it than the voters, because they've spoken. Okay, so, I would tend to respect the democratic process, and the voters have spoken through election. So, I would say, I think that's a pretty strong margin there. And as we, as we look at the percentages and all of that required, essentially, 10% is, I think, a low enough number. It could be lower, 5%, could lower that margin, but, I would just tend to say this thing was brought before the voters made a choice here. I would tend to respect the choice that the voters made.
One other question, Mr. Valdez.
Yes, sir.
Typically, how many registered voters are in each district?
Roughly,
That's why we needed those figures, because it varies tremendously.
14,000 más o menos?
there are about 15,000 per district,
per
on,
district.
on average.
So 10%
1,400.
would be like 1,400 signatures.
Yeah.
When,
For
when not-
citywide, yes.
When the voters that actually voted might be less than that, 1,000 or 800.
Normally it is, you don't get 100% voter out of any district. Normally it's about,
Anybody else?
15, 20,
You know, I'm gonna
30% at
recognize
the most.
Mr. Reyna again.
Well, I do have
You don't
a,
have to, but. Am I recognized?
Yes, sir.
I understand the concern that you raised. Your name?
Rodriguez.
Mr. Rodriguez. That there's been no pattern of abuse. My concern is that there's a potential, well, there has existed a potential, an avenue for utilizing that opportunity, that process. It's opportunistic. When I did my research, it was really extensive research on this issue. You know, I looked at city council recall elections in Houston, in El Paso, and in San Antonio. One of our favorite sons running for president, Julian Castro, was recalled because they supported an unpopular ordinance. The people in Houston, they supported, the council members were being subject to recall because they supported a ordinance providing equal rights for all citizens regardless of their sexual orientation. The same was true in El Paso. They were recalled because, so understand that recall elections may come from anywhere, any corner, you know, unannounced all of a sudden because of unpopular decisions that city council members make. And not just because they ran a red light or they committed some potential offense of moral turpitude. Recall them. They can recall them, never mind the right, they forfeit their office. They can be recalled for any damn reason. No good reason, bad reason, whatever. And so that's been my concern. When I saw that, I said, we cannot have, if you cut it down to 10% of the people who voted, and people just said very few people vote, right? Can you imagine how many petitioners have to sign to get a recall election going? I mean, is it fair to the people who voted for these people to go into office to go ahead and then be subjected to defending their right to have elected that person to office and face a recall election because, someone decided that, capriciously perhaps decided that that person needed to get recalled because they didn't support the right ordinance or were supporting the wrong ordinance. And that's been my concern, and I continue to have that concern. Again, let's study this, check out all the different possibilities that exist, because if we have one recall election in the next 2 years, 10 years, for no good reason, and that it comes to pass because we passed this, they got 10% of the people who voted, and 10% of the people who were registered to vote. That's how they got the recall. Think of me when you see that.
Anybody else? From that I've not heard from?
Yeah, me. I don't think oh, yeah,
Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Well, all the examples you cited are from out of town. So the only experience we have is what happened here. And a recall election is not, the candidate will have an opportunity to once again present his views to the voters.
Once again, you said it, once again.
If it becomes a problem in the future, it hasn't been in the past. It hasn't been a problem in the past. If it in the future it becomes a problem, we can address it then. But right now it hasn't been a problem, and so 10% registered voters is a very high number to get to get people to, if you put it high enough, it's not gonna happen. It's as simple as that. And the reason why recall elections have happened is because, well, you cited some examples that were frivolous, but that wasn't the case here. That wasn't the case in this town. The one and only time when it happened was because there was a serious situation there.
So what problem are you trying to fix by lowering it?
Uh,
If you're saying it's not. it doesn't
Mr.
happen?
Cisneros, did you have something
fail?
else to add?
Well, I just wanted to add that, if the potential is what's a word, Mr. Reina, the potential was there from 1981 to 2016, and it was only used once. So,
So what's the problem?
Have we exhausted the discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand.
what's the motion?
What's the motion?
The motion was to change it to 10% of
The actual voter, of the voters.
of the voters that voted
In the last election.
in the last election, yes.
Okay.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. The motion passes.
I can count.
Really?
Was that
The next item,
a joke?
It's special interest the way you're going.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yes,
not.
you
No,
are.
I'm not.
Yeah, it forces the,
No, it
the
doesn't.
person,
No,
the
no.
working person
No, I'm not.
to
is
compete with the
section
big
F,
boss.
which we already
Yes, no,
handled.
Yes, sir.
Then it's G, section 2.16, city secretary. As I understand it, the city secretary is basically, is that the city manager shall recommend a city secretary whose appointment shall be confirmed by the affirmative vote of no less than 5 council members. And the city secretary may be removed from office by the affirmative vote of no less than 5 council members. So basically, it's the city manager's prerogative to recommend, and then the council either approves or does not approve. And was the recommendation to make it such that strictly the city council should appoint? Do you recall? In any event, is there any feeling either way on that matter to take it away from the city manager and give it to the city council?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify before
Yes,
getting to it, in the information we had received, it says that it's currently the city manager recommends to the city secretary, and the proposal was that the city secretary should be appointed by report to and be removed by the city council without the city manager's involvement. That's what was proposed, but, well, I'll just leave it.
Anybody care to make a motion on this matter, or just leave it alone?
Judge, but that's the case not just with the city secretary, but also with the city attorney and the police chief.
They're on the
No.
agenda.
No.
I'm sorry?
Not the
They're all on
police chief or the fire chief.
Those are by state law.
Auditor?
Okay, so then, who is now subject, if this amendment passes, the proposed amendment, it's the city secretary and who else?
Well,
Well,
but the one we have on the agenda is just the city secretary.
Yeah, individually, so.
We'll address also the clerk of the municipal court and the planning and zoning director. And let me just tell you at the outset, I'm a strong proponent of the city manager form of government. And if you're gonna take power away from the city manager, then just get rid of him and have the politicians run the city. Basically. So.
Is that a motion? I'll second that one.
I agree. So, whatever, but, you know, again, I'm just one person. What are your wishes?
I propose that we leave it the way it is, that the city secretary be left under the manager's jurisdiction. And so by so doing, we don't need to make this a motion, right? Because that's what it is right now.
You can leave it alone if you like.
No
All
action.
right. Then we'll go on to the next agenda item, which again is 5.03, the appointment of the clerk of the municipal court.
Actually, H, Judge. Section 2.17, the internal auditor, or you're gonna jump
Can we
up?
skip H?
All internal auditor.
Internal auditor and then
Oh, I'm
city
sorry,
attorney.
did I miss one?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
That's-
H, I'm sorry, I'm getting senile. 2.17, the internal auditor. Again, it's the same situation, isn't it?
Nothing to do with the city.
I believe that all those are the same situation.
Well, here it's the opposite. It says the
Yeah,
city
okay.
council shall appoint and evaluate an officer of the city who shall have the title of internal auditor. Do we want to change that? What, who would be at odds with the internal auditor saying, hey, you know, you've messed up here, you spent this money where you shouldn't have?
Well, the auditor doesn't
Would it be
do
the
investigations.
city manager, or would it be the
Yes.
council?
That's why, as it stands right now, the auditor does not report or is not recommended by the city manager. Just reports directly to the city council.
And that's as it should be, don't you think?
So there's nothing to change it, right?
No, I don't even believe there was a proposal to change it.
No, I think last meeting I had mentioned that there are certain positions that the council may terminate, and we're gonna, if it was okay to bring those back, and these were some of them, or these are the ones, excluding police chief and fire chief.
So the reason that they're on this agenda right now is to basically leave them alone, leave them the way.
Well, not to leave them alone, I mean, if y'all wanna consider anything.
Consider what is being considered.
Well, like in the situation.
Aside from this, what do,
In the situation with
City
city secretary, it says report to and be evaluated by the city manager, yet I deal mostly with the city council. And so that was something that you all might wanna consider. The other thing is, the city council directly may terminate my position and the auditors, and the other ones that you'll see right now, those have to come from recommendations from the city manager to terminate. So my city secretary position and the auditor are a little bit different than everybody else's. And so that was one of the issues. And on a personal issue, with the prior administration, I had issues, and I don't wanna dive into it too much, but there was times where I didn't agree with what was being recommended by the manager. And so I was always told, you work for me, which I work for the city. And so that was an issue I had. And so I'd rather report to 9 individuals as a council, not individually, but as a council, than to one person. You know, everyone has a different opinion, but that was my issue.
They have the final say so in hiring you, but who recommends the position?
In this situation, in the one in city secretary, it's the city manager. And
The
then
city
with-
manager
yes.
recommends
Hiring.
the hiring,
Yes, recommends the individual,
approved by the council,
and
but every,
approved by council,
But let me just, again, point of order, we're on.
but now we're on auditor.
The internal auditor.
That one I think is just by the city council itself.
And here, the internal auditor says the city council shall approve. It does, the city manager has nothing to do with that. And I think because he would be the watchdog over the city manager and his operations. Mr. Reyna.
Do we have any information from the people that occupy these offices about any issues they have with the relationships, you know, who supervises them, who dictates to them, who reviews their, evaluates them and all that? I mean, do we have?
It looks like we're flying in the dark here.
Well, I mean, we're making judgments or passing you know, city charter amendments here on these positions without really, like
theory?
I said, is there a history of abuse? You know, as you said, is there a history of abuse here, you know? And I can certainly understand the city manager, form of government versus strong mayor, form of government, Mr. Chair. But certainly, I mean, we're talking about changing relationships here, you know, in the city charter, so we have what evidence or what information do we have that would lead us one way or the other?
I understand, we have what we have, and we have to draw on our own understanding and experience.
No, I don't, I
Without more.
disagree. Why don't we subpoena them to come here and tell us, you know, what's going on, you know, and hear them out, because I'd hate to make a decision in the dark.
I don't know that we have the power to subpoena, I don't think so.
Maybe we do, I mean, you know, there's commissions that
If
have
we
subpoena
could, we'd
power,
bring
right? Do we have
Trump
subpoena power?
Yes.
We have subpoena power. They can come voluntarily, you know, write them a letter. Says
Well, do you
come.
want to table this matter? until we-
Really, from my point of view, I just think we need to hear from them, history of abuse, the pattern, you know, issues that they have that would enlighten us to make the informed decision. I mean, it's like, we're guessing here.
Well, what you say makes sense, but fact is, our theory of government is, what is the purpose of the auditor, the internal auditor? Do you want him to work for the people that he audits? Do you want him to be responsible to the city manager and audit the city manager? That's why I think this section says the city council.
I can see where the theory of government that we have that we would uphold is something that we could actually, pass judgment on and say, this is the way it should work, right? But I also think that understanding the real world, how it really works, is also helpful in trying to make us understand, helping us understand, whether or not there's any changes in.
Again, my question, do you wanna table this matter for next meeting and have somebody come and tell you what the problems are?
Is there any way we could revisit G next week with Mr. Valdez telling us more information?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And the internal auditor as well and the city attorney?
Well, Mr. Valdez is here now, so.
Well, we've already passed that agenda
So we
item,
didn't
but
take any
Yeah, that's why I
action.
said revisit because we already passed it, so.
No
I
action
mean,
was
he
taken.
said subpoena power, so I said maybe they would be the best ones to.
Mr. Castillo?
Yeah.
That's the reason for my question, Mr. Valdez. We're being asked to consider, in this case, your item G and Mr. whoever the internal auditor is, we're being asked to consider, shall we continue the way we have how we're set up right now? Or what? What's the alternative? We don't
If
have
I
an
may,
alternative. We either
let-
consider it the way it is, or change it. To what? That's my question.
Again, I don't speak for the auditor, the current person there. And the only reason that these items were considered again, I think at the time last month, Commission asked about the city attorney and the city secretary and said, would you want to consider other positions that the council has, I guess, can fire? And you all said yes, and so that's the only reason here. Not that there's an issue, not that there's any problems. I haven't heard of any from their positions.
Mr. Rodriguez?
To echo your sentiments a few minutes ago of manager type of government, theoretically that's what we did way back when in the early 80s, and we divided the power. The council was legislative, and the manager was administrative. So I, for one, would want to maintain the city secretary in the same situation that he's in, that it's the manager who recommends, instead of giving that position to the council. That would be giving too much power, in my opinion, to the council. On the internal auditor, though, I agree with you that the auditor should report to the council. And that goes true for anything else that the manager as far as I'm concerned, that the manager today handles, I would like to keep it the way it is instead of giving it to the council.
Mr. Valdez?
I was just gonna say, with Mr. Rodriguez, I totally agree. I hope he never recommends another city secretary for a long time. So, I don't have an issue with that part of it.
All right. Then let's go on to the next item. Section 402, the city attorney. Now, this is a different situation, and I don't know, I would want to hear from Mateo, because what are the pitfalls in working for the council and not being responsible to the city manager and vice versa?
Well, my obligations to the city council, so it does create difficulty, but it would have to be honestly, I mean, it depends on any particular city manager, any particular council, so I don't think it should be based on my experience. I will say 96% of the cities in the state of Texas, the city attorney answers to the council directly. And there's similar statistics for the city secretary. And there's probably a reason for that. So, I mean, personally, off the record, yes, I think if it's a great, manager for a government, it shouldn't be any issues. You should be able to answer to the council and to be able to fulfill your duties, your professional duties, but sometimes that can get in the way if you answer directly to somebody who puts certain items on the agenda and doesn't allow you to give the advice you're supposed to be giving. So that could be a problem, but it shouldn't be a problem.
Judge, I can give another example. I know I'm going back to mine, but one that affected me as a candidate when I ran the last time with the former city secretary. I had asked, based on what my interpretation of the charter, again, personal interpretation, if I could run again. And basically he agreed with my interpretation. Come back Monday, this is a Friday, come back on Monday, he basically tells me, I can't let you register to run. And I said, well, you're the elections administrator. No one has power over you. He says, city manager told me I can't. I said, and who is he? You're the elections administrator. And so I just asked him, please timestamp it that I turned it in on time. Sued the city, was fortunate that I won in court, ran and got elected. But that's one instance that could happen where there's interference from the manager. Now, I'm not saying right now the thing's okay. I've been asked in the past, you need to write this letter because you're the city secretary. So, well, I don't agree with it, but you need to write it. You work for me. And so instances happen. It's just based on the individual. So, like Ms. Hale said, I'd rather be, what is it? And even the mayor brought it up to me. He was asking me, the other day we had a conversation. He says, well, you need to be independent from the city manager and the council. I said, well, that's a hard road to travel. I mean, you have to answer to someone. His idea was make it an election, every position election. I said, well, there's no elections administrator that's elected. Webb County has the elections administrator that they appoint. School districts appoint theirs. And so I think in the state, I don't think anybody runs that's the elections administrator. So to create an independence, I was trying to figure that out myself. I said, yeah, I'd like to be independent to give my honest opinion to council, as sometimes they seek it, and to the city manager also, because from time to time I'll go over and have conversations with them. But I think that, I know it says there that, I guess our position is that at any point, council can get 5 votes and say, you know what, we're not happy with you for whatever reason, and vote you out, and that's fine. That's the will of the council. But I think that if one way to kind of control that also would be having more than just 5 council members terminate you, or have a
Like an override.
whatever it's called, 2/3 vote or whatever.
Yeah, 2/3.
That's one way of doing it. If I answer directly to them. That's just, there's different scenarios that I've seen personally on both sides, being city secretary and being just a constituent out there. Where
Isn't it difficult in your case or the case of the city attorney if you work for the council, how do they supervise you? They'd have to vote every time? How, who would tell you, hey, you're not coming to work at 8 like everybody
Do the
else? Who would?
evaluations, do the evaluation type process, similar to the city manager, same way they.
And the city has protocols as far as you need to be here at this hour, personnel matters, those are ordinances that we have to follow as employees. So that's not an issue, I think. I've never had an issue with that. I mean, it's not an easy, thing to look at, but just telling you that some of the issues that I've run into on both sides.
And.
Or you can leave it alone.
Just, yeah, and that's, as far as the city attorney, I know that the city council did, propose this change, because of issues that have since been addressed by the passage of an ordinance, because, when the city manager was not there was no one for me to report to. So they put that I would direct the, answer to the city manager or the deputy city manager, so. Really, I don't think the same issues as to why they put it on the agenda to begin with, exist, so if that makes any difference.
Both of you, are under the city manager's
I am.
jurisdiction.
I report to and I'm evaluated, and there's issue of what is report to. Do you tell him what you're doing, or do you just do whatever he says? He thinks it's, and I'm not saying current, I'm just saying, he thinks it's, I tell you what to do, and the other one is, no, I work for the city. And so that's a difference of opinion, left to interpretation by the charter, unless you all recommend otherwise.
Typically, all the positions state that the city manager will recommend, and the city manager will also recommend dismissal and hiring. In his case, or in this position's case, for some reason it says report to, but can be terminated by the council, so it's kind of
Without his recommendation.
without
is that
this
right?
manager, so it kind of,
So you're somewhere in the middle.
right.
Yeah,
But-
myself and the auditor, the attorney.
Well, the auditor strictly is under the council's jurisdiction, is it not? The auditor,
Yes.
the attorney,
Yes.
yes. Now, in your case, the city attorney, you report to the manager or you do not?
Yes.
Okay, so then you have that
Well, no,
semi-independent?
it says I report to him, but I'm terminated by the
Of
council
the council.
Okay.
Without
Well,
recommendation.
without his
The
recommendation.
city attorney shall serve until removed upon the recommendation of the city manager and the affirmative vote of no less than 5 council members. And it's the same thing for the city secretary.
The only ones that are directly terminated by council without anyone's recommendation is the auditor and the city secretary. No, but yes, recommendation.
But we're on the city attorney, so what are you?
My 2 cents, sorry.
So the proposal is what? From what we have now to what?
Well, to change it so that the city attorney is appointed and answers only to the council.
So take that position away from the manager and give it to the council.
That's basically the proposition, and
But if I may, and I agree with you on the city manager, because we had a horrible system with the past. But we've also had some city managers that have been pretty bad. And we went through a bunch of them, and there was, we got Tannenbaum and the FBI coming into this building. So I think there is a need to, and the council has the control, not the mayor. And it takes at least 5 councilmen. I find that because of the experiences of some of the managers.
again, let's look at some possible situations. There's a bidding war on a contract. The city council wants to award it in violation of the requirements of the best and lowest. The city manager is saying, you can't do this, then legal gets involved. If legal works for the council, who is legal gonna side with?
There will always be conflicts. I don't care what type of government you have, there's going to be personalities and weaknesses in any type of government. That's why the county has so many elected positions. They're independent. The county judge has no jurisdiction over the sheriff and so on.
Wasn't it once that the city attorney and city secretary were elected positions,
70s.
Yes,
and then they got changed?
yes.
A certain independence from the boss.
Back then it was the mayor, but
The
we gave it to
boss.
the manager.
Yes, and that's, I think that's a mistake. We had
To
such a
answer to-
terrible mayor that we just went overboard on the city manager.
In the words of a friend of mine, to answer to many is to answer to none.
Let me write that
You know
down.
him.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Mr.
are
Reyna.
we discussing or is it just,
We're just talking, no, there's no
talking?
motion. You wanna make a motion?
no, I want to talk. Just like you all are talking. I too want to talk. Meron tayong mga centavos to offer, you know? You know, the theory of the city manager form of government, you know, like we talked about theory a while ago, you know, why we went there, we understand, you know, why it works, I think theoretically why it works is that, you know, difference taking the politics out of the city manager's position, right? That, you know, that's the theory, you know, the position is supposed to be one where the professionalism takes over. They're looking at it from the standpoint of the public interest to be served, and regardless of whose, you know, feet they step on, right? You know, it could, you know, rub some politicians the wrong way, public officials the wrong way with the way that the manager was, like when they decided to, remember that city manager that decided to go ahead and annex Del Mar? Del Mar was not part of the city of Laredo way back when. You know, and the city manager came in and says, what in the world is going on here, you know? Del Mar right there, living off, you know, benefiting from the city of Laredo, everything, and yet not be actually a part of Laredo and tax-paying citizens of Laredo. So that annexation occurred under that, because of that city manager who came in and said, called it for what it was. It didn't matter that some politicians, public servants were in the pocket of some people from Del Mar, right? It didn't matter, you know, because that was what's going on. And so it came to pass, and that was really a remarkable development in the city, for the city of Laredo. You know, we know the rest of the story. But it's oversight, I think, is a problem. If you have a problem with the city manager, it's first of all, the selection process. Who you select, you better vet that applicant pretty well. And then oversight, you have to have oversight of what that city manager is doing. So who's responsible for the oversight, you know, of a city manager, you know, who's been hired by the city? Who's doing that type of oversight work? And if we're not watching that you know, and doing that oversight, then that person could go off the deep end and do all types of things that they shouldn't do, and then we could be in trouble. So it's not just that it's a city manager that we get bad apples, we will. Like we get bad politicians, bad everything, right? It's all in the realm of possibility. So, you know, that you pass it on to the council. How many times you're going to change? You know, have new council members and changing, you know, the changing of the guard there. You know, and you know, perhaps, you know, skip out on, you know, not have continuity. So that's my concern, that I understand with the patron system and all that and how that works, and I've been, you know, very, very familiar with that over the years. So, and why the city manager was done, you know, what they kept to pass as part of the city charter revisions. We keep it, and we become, you know, like people watching over the city manager like they should. Keep an eye on that office and do the oversight and make sure that you know, that the performance that he's set out to do, what he's paid for is, or she is paid for is done. It's, there's no changes necessary here. I don't see.
I agree.
Just add that it's worked well for 40 years. It shouldn't be changed because of any particular individual, and I don't believe that it's an issue right now that the council's even pushing it because an ordinance was adopted. So I don't think this is something that they would have brought forth at this time. At least
Yeah.
the city attorney.
Mr. Sanchez?
Yes, thank you. It seems like the discussion on this topic and several topics, and it seems like we're trying really, really hard to put measures in place that provide checks and balances and will prevent abuses and prevent anything improper from occurring. And that's certainly a worthy cause to try to do that. I don't know how feasible that is, and I go back and I think, you know, this has been tried, you know, by many entities over and over. When the Constitution of the United States was written, it was written with those same ideals in mind. And yet we see even to this day that there's abuses, because it gets down to the people that are put in those positions. So we can create a perfect system, but if people get put in those positions that are imperfect, which all of us are, but also not truly driven to do the right thing, these injustices are still going to occur. And we cannot legislate people's actions until after they're done. We can try to control it, but just because we legislate that doesn't mean they're not going to violate whatever it says. And city charter can say this, as we've seen, things are done that go contrary to that. And then you try to rectify things after that. But that's been tried over and over, and we're trying to do that again. And I don't know that we're going to be able to come up with a perfect city charter that's going to prevent any possible abuses from here on out. We can do the best that we can, but, you know, as long as people are people, I think we're going to be seeing some of these things occur. We've certainly seen it in our recent history in this city. Not that the city has recent history, but in our personal recent history, we've seen that happen. And this charter is a result of that, an effort to try to correct that when it was initially done and as it's been amended over the years. So while the debate is great to try to do things, fix things so that abuses don't occur and things work fairly, I don't know that we're actually ever going to do that. I think we can just try to do the best that we can and trust that the people that are in place and that are put in place are going to respect that and try to do the best that they can. So I don't want us to frustrate ourselves trying to accomplish a goal that may not be fully attainable. That's all I have.
Then we'll move on to the item J, section 5.03, the clerk of the municipal court. Here, this is a horse of a different color, in my opinion. As you know, the municipal court has an elective judge. and maybe it's because of my personal experience, but a judge has to have a staff that he can trust, that answers to him. And I don't know that the clerk of the municipal court should be under the city manager. It should be under the judge that was duly elected to run that court. It's a position of trust. That's my opinion, but I'll hear from the rest of you.
I'm agree. I'm agreed. You can give justice if you are not free people to do.
Again, the scenario is, hey, Mr. Clerk, talk to your judge. We're not collecting enough in fines. You better do something, or his budget suffers. And I just have a very strong opinion that the clerk of the court should be nominated by the municipal court judge. Mr. Reyna?
Chair, you mentioned that the clerk, Mr. Clerk holds a position of trust. How so?
Well, he works very closely with the judge.
Well, a lot of people work closely with other people. Doesn't make them a position of trust.
He's the one that takes them the cases, he's the
Well,
one that
what-
schedules the
what is it
cases.
like, what defines,
He schedules the cases. And so, I don't know how, the judge has to schedule, and, you know, if the city manager and decides, no, you can't do it this way. It destroys the whole concept of the judicial, you know, when we talk about the third branch of government, that's the judicial.
yeah, I understand that. I mean, I also know about the fourth branch of government.
So again, I just throw that out. I don't know that it matters much, but I would think a municipal court judge who gave up his practice, I think now he's required to be a lawyer. Is
Yes,
that,
yes, by state law. And
you know, you give up your practice and you devote yourself to being a judicial officer for maximum 8 years, because there's term limits.
So it follows then that if that were true, then the municipal clerk would serve at the pleasure of the judge. Every election, new judge is elected perhaps. Every new judge is elected,
Yes.
that clerk, municipal clerk, would actually they would be free without violating that person's First Amendment rights to remove them from office and
That
put
could
in someone.
That could happen, yes,
It
sir.
could be which could very well be a political patronage appointee.
That could happen.
That's what you're saying, that they could because that's a position of confidence and trust. They're, certainly exempt from the political affiliation protections or didn't campaign for me type of thing, so that kind of stuff. That's what you're saying.
Well, again, that's my personal experience.
No, I'm saying that's the trust relationship that you see between the
Yes.
clerk and the judge.
Absolutely, sir. But let's not try to fix something that ain't broke. Again, I'm just expounding on something. It's on the agenda, so just to give you food for thought.
I missed the beginning, the situation here. The clerk is appointed or not appointed by the judge?
By the city manager. Right now, it's by the
yes,
city
city
manager.
manager, because
It
it's a
says-
department head, and the departments under the city.
So the proposal is that the judge appoint that,
I think
that
that's,
position, is that?
Well, you know, again, I'm
Is that the
just thinking, that I would prefer that it be that way. If I were gonna be the municipal court judge, I would want to be able to appoint the clerk of the court rather than the city manager. Because it's the third branch of government, the judicial, is an independent branch that should be able to call the cases as he sees them without, having any concern. And his right-hand man is gonna be the clerk.
But drawing a parallel here, Judge, Mr. Chair. The district clerk, certainly serves all district courts in Webb County, or any county, right? And so, that's an elected position.
Yeah, and so I'm familiar with the problems that arise from that.
Well, and I'm asking, but
They
that,
bring you the
that clerk is.
files, they don't make the entries, and so on and so forth.
But that clerk is not considered to be, in a confidential and trust relationship with each of the judges, right?
Well, under the county system, no, because he's an elective officer. And you know what happens in the county? Elective officers, they answer to no one. They don't come to work, they don't return calls, and it just goes on. They don't do timesheets, nothing.
There are pros and cons here. Like the president brings in his, his team, there's so many people that he has to have that he brings in.
Let me just guess, let's leave it alone for now, and let's go to the planning and zoning director. That's 9.01. Is there any recommendation on that one?
There's one for the planning director, but I don't see one for.
The proposal is what?
I don't see one.
I guess, 9.01, planning and zoning director, there shall be a planning and zoning director headed by a director who shall be appointed and removed by the city manager with the approval of the city council. And then the responsibilities, that's the only reason that he's here.
I
And you all can look at it or not look at it, it's up to you all.
And if
But
we-
somebody, I'm sorry.
If we follow through on what the theories we've had, we should leave it alone, but I'll hear from,
There is, one other thing that I'm reading from this document we presented that adds that the planning and zoning director also requires certification by the American Institute of Certified Planners. And the suggestion of the recommendation is to add that as a requirement for the planning director.
we'll make that in the form of a motion.
I do.
That's the motion?
What is that that you're reading, Brendan?
This handout that we received initially, maybe it was even last year, I don't remember, but no, I think we got it at the.
It was,
that was what the council
Yeah.
voted for, to be considered.
Mr. Castillo joined us, after our first meeting, so he might not have gotten this.
I don't recall having.
You wanna see this one?
Yeah. I just wanna see what it is you're referring to. Thank you.
so Mr. Sanchez, you made a motion to
Yes,
that
sir.
extent?
Yes, sir. I don't think it has a second at this point.
I second.
Oh, you did?
There's a motion and a second, any discussion?
What's the motion?
that he be certified,
That you have the certification, I get my
By
copy.
the American Institute of Certified Planners. That's what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And you second?
Yes.
there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Now I'll call for the,
But the charter now does not require that qualification.
It's not in the charter, no. That particular requirement is not in there.
But is that a requirement for the job? Is that one of the listed,
Oh, not currently.
not currently, it could be,
And that was the recommendation that was sent forth to us.
It has a note here, if I may, Mr. Chairman. It says, currently, the position of planning director is appointed and removed by the city manager with the approval of the city council. Qualifications are not addressed. I guess that's the point that,
that's,
that you mentioned.
Yes.
That it would be required that the certification by the American Institute of City Certified Planners. So I think that's the only difference.
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
So is that the only qualification we're gonna throw in there?
The only thing it says.
No, that's the motion, right? Saying that's the motion, that it have.
That's the
require
only
that
one that I'm proposing.
Is that, I understand that, but I mean, what about other considerations? I mean, is that it?
like, what do you have in mind?
Bring it forth.
Well, they didn't support Donald Trump, for example. I'm throwing that out because I'm just, I know I'm being facetious here, but I
think
mean,
you all
I'm trying to make the
retired.
point that, you know,
Probably.
that
Let me
there are
call- let me call-
qualifications, you know, we put that in there as if it's like the the silver bullet for, for having a director that actually is qualified, right? You know,
It's start.
well, that's a start, exactly, a start. You know, is that the finish?
I was gonna say, the council just hired a planning director about 2 months ago, maybe,
They,
and he was certified,
Herbie, right?
but I think he was like, he comes from Utah because nobody locally is certified, and it's,
Okay, that was what I was gonna say, that certification means that they have to have had certain requirements
Right.
to get
I
that
understand
certification.
that, sir. I really do
It's just like,
understand.
you wouldn't hire a surveyor that's
I
not
really,
certified
really
engineer.
understand that.
you know?
I'm not talking about that.
Okay, so be specific with what else you want included in that.
Well, that's what I'm searching for. I mean, you want us to go ahead and think of everything, like in a minute's notice? I'm asking the question because, when you apply for a job, it's like, let's say you're a lawyer,
you put yourself.
you apply for a job, well, you have to have a law license, And sometimes they say have practiced for 5 years, and, or you actually have a license to practice with the U.S. Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court of the, so that's what I'm saying, do you understand? I mean, there could be other things that we could say, 5 years of experience, 10 years of experience, that's the type of stuff I'm asking about.
So you think this qualification does not belong in the charter, I guess?
No, but we're saying that qualification belongs to the charter. If that one belongs to the
Then
charter,
there should be others.
then maybe the whole damn, set of qualifications should go in there.
I see.
But very basic
So there's-
qualifications
there's
that,
inconsistency.
that to protect the integrity of the office.
Okay.
The planning and zoning director, they make really important decisions, by the way. Really, I think you all understand, but those of you that are investors and developers and all that, you know how that works. So, I'm just throwing that out.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in my making the motion, it
We're just talking.
certainly wasn't my intention to imply that that would be the only requirement or the only qualification, but that be included amongst them. We can review the job description if we want to get into the job description level. I don't know that it's really a good idea to put job descriptions in the city charter.
No, I don't think
That's up to the city manager. as far
So,
as that.
but if it's in the charter, it will require that whenever that position description is written, that will be there. So I don't know that we have to put every qualification in there, but we certainly can indicate what we do want to see amongst the qualifications that are posted.
Yeah.
But if there's other ideas, I mean, we can take it up at the next meeting if.
No, let me call for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All the ayes have it, one opposed. The motion passes.
Two.
Two?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cisneros, also voting against. Then the, next item is future business. Mr. Cisneros, you had one particular
Well,
item.
Yeah, let's see. It was actions required in ordinance. Section 2.08, I would like for that to be on the next meeting, please.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Mr. Chair?
Let me just, so that we're probably gonna get close to finishing up. A lot of, what we thought was important. How about we put on the balance of the items and the recommendations that came from the city on the agenda?
Council.
It's that list that you have there,
Any ones we have not addressed
the ones that we have not addressed.
from the handout, from the blue list?
It was A through Y.
And some of them, you know, are, I think are obsolete, probably go over them real fast.
Some of them were already addressed by ordinance, I believe.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
would that be agreeable?
Yes, sir.
Then I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Reyna? You-
Oh, is there a second already?
Your second?
No, there's a
No,
second
we'll
already.
put you down as the
I'm
second.
not gonna second it, there's a second already?
Yes.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Mr.
Is it clear what we're gonna have on the agenda, Mr. Valdez?
2.08 and everything else that's remaining.
And,
Before we close, I would like to say something. But before we wrap up, I would like to.
yes, well, go ahead, because I was just gonna call for the.
Okay, thank you. I just want to express my concern as pertains to the sections that have to do with the department directors. It would sure make it a lot easier for us if we had the directors here when their particular department comes up, and I don't know why we have expressed concern about the public not showing up, but we don't even have interest from the city. And, you know, to me, I don't know if there's been any directive that they not participate. No, because, you know, do they get a copy of the agendas? Do they know that these things are being looked at? I mean, I would think if this was my position, I'd want to come in and, you know, put in my 2 cents as things are being considered. So, you know, I'm a little dismayed that we've got 0 participation, present company accepted. Of course, you know,
I'm sure they didn't know, and this is not something that council had even brought forth, at least for the planning zoning, for the auditor.
No, and those
So,
weren't,
they're
again,
not
the only
aware.
reason that they were, the position, again, was there was because, council was, voted to terminate those positions, so that's what I mentioned last time. I didn't advise anyone, cause again, it's just dealing with the position, not the individual. As far as, and I don't know that there's any issues with them, but that's the only reason they were here. The
But there
positions
may
were
be
here.
some questions that we have
Okay.
that we may want to ask. And, you know, I don't know if the rest of the commission agrees with me, but, you know, I would certainly like to be able to have the opportunity to ask what is it that you do? What are your duties, you know, currently? How does it report, you know, who do you report to? You know, just things like that. We can, and I understand that, you know, sometimes these meetings go a little bit long, and, you know, we can put those early in the agenda to try to get them through, and they can be on their way and go back home, or go home. You know, I would just like to express that, and like, again, I don't know if how the rest of the commission feels, but, you know, when pertaining to particular departments, in those positions, I would like to be able to hear from them.
We'll look at the position or the items that are coming back, and if there's any one that pertains to a position, we'll ask that person if they can come and be here present, in case you have questions.
They can also be subpoenaed.
That's true.
Well,
I
We
don't think
talked
you'd have
about
any
that.
problem. They'll come. If they-
Is
Do you
this
want
an
them to come
important
back?
commission or what?
They're-
I mean,
they're
you know, I
exempt
mean, you know,
employees,
I
are
mean,
they
Are we
not?
really doing important
Exempt.
work, or are we just doing,
They're exempt, for the directors are, yes.
right, if we're gonna do it, I mean, let's go the full 9 yards. Let's, you know, let's act like a commission, and if we have to subpoena people, they can't come voluntarily. And you, sir, want to talk to these people, but you can't. You wanna do it formally, like, in, you know, at a commission meeting, that may be the only answer to get those questions answered. And they might take the fifth, you know.
But again, these were never issues that council or anybody brought forth for these positions, that's so, I don't know what.
I don't
concern-
think it's so much the positions that there might be issue. I think the relationship between city manager and the position and the council, sometimes if we get an insight into, you know, what is the best way,
Yeah, how it functions.
that would be like,
We're not gonna
something
get
interesting.
into any issues, personnel or otherwise. I don't think that's our intent. It's
No.
just to find out, how does it work, you know, in the system?
yeah,
Sure.
balance, like a balance.
You would like us to bring back the directors that this addresses?
Well, I think of the ones that are going to be brought forth in the next agenda, I would like to,
I don't think there's any more unless you wanna revisit the items from today.
I'm sorry?
There's no more,
There's no more.
items
So, but in
that
case
were
there
cut.
are, we'll ask
We
them to be
didn't
here.
take any action on some of these positions. But, I mean,
There it goes.
it's up to the commission as a whole.
Yeah, that's it.
Separate question.
yes, sir.
If everything else that is pending is going to be presented next time, is that the idea?
Yes,
So more than likely, next meeting will be the last meeting for this commission for
well,
what?
we don't know,
But, but maybe.
Positions at council.
it may be.
First draft at least.
Wait a minute, that can be it.
Again, the public,
These are just the items that I
The
believe
council recommended to bring to you.
But
You can
Right.
still address other
each and
items.
every other.
right.
That doesn't mean this is the last meeting.
I would have wanted to hear from the public, but
Yes.
there's no interest.
We did get some, responses to the letters to the schools, and they are interested in coming. They just started school, I would imagine in the next few weeks, they'd start scheduling. There were some interested schools.
The chair, am I hearing that we're coming to the end of this?
Well,
I mean,
we
after
don't know.
this, I'm sorry?
I just
Not this
wanna have
meeting.
all those items on the agenda, and we'll take them, and if we can't get to them, we'll.
Well, because I've got a little pile of proposals, you know, that I
Well-
haven't presented to you all, so.
But now's your time to say what you
Well,
want
I
on
mean,
there.
not right now. I mean, I've got them coming, next meeting, I'll pile it up.
All right, well, fine.
I'm saying, but I can't imagine that it's gonna be like, the door is now shut to the commission, that's it, you know?
No, it's not gonna happen like that.
Well, that was my follow-up to that if any of the commission members here have proposals of their own, that at the next meeting they be brought up. And also that if the public, the press just left a few minutes ago, but this is televised right in public television.
Somewhere.
So addressing the public that if they do want any amendments to the charter, they need to come here quicker rather than later. And if we might ourselves pass the word around to the people that we know, that if they have any suggestions to let us know quick, because otherwise, a meeting or two more down the road, and that probably would be it.
It shouldn't be it. I mean, you know, we have a deadline of sometime early next, sometime
August.
in the spring to turn in this stuff, and, you know, and there's a lot of stuff that's missing from this discussion, you know, so. Well, you know, you gotta put a short fuse on this, you know, do it and get out of the way.
No,
That's not
that
what I
wasn't
said.
what I was trying to say. It's that everything that was sent to us by the city,
We can start looking at it.
probably the last meeting will be take care of. Now, then, it'll be our own things that we want to propose.
I think the suggestion of going to the media and setting up at this meeting and such a date, if you have something, bring it to the committee.
Like an open invitation, right?
Go to the Channel 8 when they do that Sunday morning.
I already did it,
Be on the headlines.
yes,
Yes, sir.
and no response. I don't know if nobody watches that program.
I watch it.
It's after Meet the Press.
I'm not that important, so they didn't watch.
It has a good lead in.
I think I had one person make a comment, hey, I saw you on there.
And a follow-up to that is, my fear is that since the public hasn't been here and the press for a few minutes, that really the public has no idea what has been happening here for the last few months. And so whatever we decide here, whether next meeting or 4 or 5 meetings down the road, and we send it to the council, the public will have no idea what we did there. And so the council not having any pressure from the public might want to just disregard everything we did here.
And they can,
And they will.
and they can.
Yes,
Well,
of
they
course,
have done it.
that's my fear, that
No, they've done it and they will.
that since the public isn't here to say this is necessary, this is important,
That's-
just
that's
say
okay.
thank you very much.
That's my thought. Let's fix the system so that they can't ignore us when we go to before the council. You know, the recommendations have to have some teeth. They have to have teeth, you know, they have no teeth.
You know, in the heat of discussion, I had thought maybe with regards to the Ethics Commission, we should have discussed because it was on the agenda, how the members get appointed. There's criticism, of course, that how are the Ethics Commission members going to call down council members if they got appointed by them? Just like some people have said, we're not gonna do anything because we were appointed by councilmen. But the Ethics Commission is again, a different situation.
We could do it.
You know, in the county, the grievance committee was appointed automatically from the grand jury foreman for the last year or something like that, so that nobody had a say-so as to who was gonna be appointed. It was sort of like, just by chance, you got summoned and you served, and now you're gonna be on the grievance committee. And so I don't know if you all wanna give some thought to that, to propose another way to appoint the members of the Ethics Commission in a way that is fair, that's just, and that takes it out of the hands of each council member having one appointment.
I agree, it's a good idea. Certain elections, Ethics Commission appointments would be the specific question we would be addressing, right?
And I don't know how we could do it, but give it some thought.
Yeah, well, but that's what you were saying earlier. That's the point now we've done what they've handed us with the little blue boxes, and now, by the way, here's what the ethics,
So do we include it on next week or no? On next time, deal?
Whereas, you wanna include it, that we go back to the appointment of the Ethics Commission?
we can start at that point, but since we still have to finish up with the pending ones, once we do that, and then we'll be like
Why
on
don't
our
you all give
own.
it some thought,
Okay,
and once
okay.
you have some ideas, we'll,
There.
we'll ask to put it on the agenda.
Right.
But it's a difficult,
We don't have to do it at the next meeting, we can deal with this stuff.
yeah, because Mr. Reyna
How
wants to
much
keep
left?
this going.
There's not much left, right, to cover?
Don't misinterpret what I said.
Not very much.
I wanna make sure that the proposals that I have
We don't
get due consideration.
Just,
You know, and, you know, if you're gonna be like rushing them like you've done some of this stuff, I mean, we don't want that.
We're not
We're
gonna
not gonna go
have
for
it.
that.
We're gonna
I mean,
take our
it's a
time.
deliberate body, it deliberates, discusses, debates, you know, and just like, you know, on the spur of the moment, like, make a decision, you know, without, you know, with little thought to it, I mean, I'm concerned about that. There's been very little, you know, gathering of information, you know, when some of these decisions have been made, you know, like, what are you comparing it to? Just top of your head, top of our heads, we're being asked to make decisions, you know, without.
Not to
having
disagree
really-
with you, but this has been the history of commissions to amend the charter. They've always been on their own. They've met in a little room with very little or any support from anyone. You know, I'm very happy about the support that we get from the city secretary and the city attorney.
Well, it's incumbent on us to also do the research, you know, and if we can get them to do the research for us, well, let's do it. But I mean, I can't imagine that we're doing a lot of these decisions without, you know, can't imagine Congress doing something like this without more information.
Anything else you all want, any other observations? Or
Yes, getting back to the items that we have pending, there may just be a few, 2, 3, 4 maybe, of the whole package, right? And so if we don't add things for the next meeting,
We're gonna be,
we're just, it'll be a short meeting next time, that's what I'm afraid of.
We get this stuff for free. You're right.
So we think of things for next meeting to add for the November
Right.
meeting.
yeah,
Okay.
Not the same.
okay, there you go.
Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Don't make inference.
I'll move
I'm just kidding.
I was
There's a
kidding.
motion and a
Okay,
second.
well, let's stay on the kidding note.
All those in favor, say aye.
Don't sell out.
Opposed? We are adjourned until next we meet, the third Wednesday of October.
Halloween.
You wanna dress up?
Yeah. Good Washington.